3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
All right, welcome to Roots of Reality. I'm your host, Ben Baumann, and today I'm going to be talking about the history of science and religion. So throughout history, science and religion have obviously clashed, as scientific discoveries wouldn't always align with the religious narratives people wanted to believe in. And you don't really have to dig too deep in history to learn about the various people who were persecuted for questioning religious ideas regarding cosmology and the place of the earth in the universe. For example, Giordano Bruno, Baruch Spinoza, and Galileo Galilei are all examples of people who are persecuted for challenging religious preconceptions of cosmology. And even today, there are still clashes between science and religion. We see this with things like evolution and creationism. We see this with things like homosexuality and religious leaders, as well as things like the Big Bang and the origins of the universe. So it is not surprising that science and religion have not always been on the same page historically, because it still isn't on the same page today in many aspects. However, despite the historic persecutions conducted by religious organizations, the people making scientific discoveries for most of human history were people who were also religious. In fact, all three people that I had just mentioned who were facing persecution were religious scientists. Additionally, so were people like Pythagoras, the ancient Greek philosopher who was born about 2,600 years ago. He was a polytheist and a believer that the soul was immortal, yet was among the first to deem that the earth was spherical. And there are many more people like this in history. For example, the Hindu astronomer Aryabhata was born in India in 476. He would correctly argue that the planets and moon shine due to the reflection of sunlight, and was among the first to state that the stars appear to move due to the earth's rotation. Next, there is the Muslim scientist Ibn Sina. He was a dedicated Muslim, but was also a promoter of using scientific inquiry to understand the universe and questions of existence. And lastly, we also have the Christian astronomer Nicholas Copernicus, who was born in 473. He would become famous for promoting heliocentric theory, the idea that the earth revolves around the sun. So these are just a few of thousands of different examples in history. Because throughout history, most people were not atheists or non-religious, but rather people were a part of the religious community. In fact, many scientists were even members of different religious orders, whether being monks or whatnot. So because of all these examples that we have in history, this really highlights the fact that science and religion are certainly compatible, and those who claim they are not are essentially ignoring history. However, the key is whether religious leaders allow scientific inquiry to thrive or not in societies that are governed by a religious order. This has been hit or miss historically, with some religious scientists being allowed to conduct scientific research, challenging previously held religious ideas of the universe, while others were obviously not allowed to. But the whole reason people are religious in the first place stems from the biggest questions in life, like why are we here and where do we come from? I mean, this is why so many religious people were interested in science to begin with, because their thought process was, how can I understand God's creation? And they thought, well, perhaps by observing it, I can learn more about it. And learn more about why are we here and where do we come from. Now, another thing I want to point out is we often talk about religious societies that have limited scientific inquiry because of oppressive religious beliefs, which is certainly the case throughout history. We've seen many examples of this, but we've also seen many examples where scientists were allowed to practice scientific inquiry and discover new things without any hindrance from the religious leaders of the society they lived in. But also needs to be pointed out that this type of dynamic is the case for any society, religious or not. For example, even historically atheistic societies have prevented objective scientific research due to authoritarianism, much like religious-based societies have done in the past. For example, during the atheist Soviet Union, the government rejected mainstream genetics in favor of pseudoscientific theories based on the ideas of Trofim Lysenko, who rejected the scientific concept of natural selection. In turn, Soviet agriculture was greatly damaged, leading to famines that were way worse than they should have been. And even crazier, many geneticists that criticized Lysenko's beliefs were arrested or killed by the government. Now, turning things toward the modern era, we have studies that show that astrology, for example, is not an uncommon belief among atheists in modern China. Obviously, China is the major atheistic nation of the world today. So the idea that science thrives in communities of atheists while doesn't in religious societies is completely pseudo-historical. Really, science thrives in an environment that embraces scientific inquiry. Therefore, the idea that being non-religious makes one scientific is not true. Being scientific is all about whether you embrace scientific inquiry and not let your biased beliefs interfere with that process. And this is an issue that affects atheists and religious people alike. I mean, there have even been studies that have come out recently that plenty of atheists will believe in supernatural things or other forms of pseudoscience. For example, it's not uncommon to come across an atheist who's, believing in things like UFOs visiting Earth, or, they're anti-GMO, or believe in some aspects of spirituality. None of this stuff is surprising. In fact, even the very concept of atheism, like religious belief, is based not on any type of scientific evidence. For instance, for one to claim that some sort of God doesn't exist is a statement out of faith, rather than a statement out of evidence. Given the entire concept of a God that created the universe would mean that such a God exists outside of it, therefore not being something one can investigate scientifically. So overall, being atheist in many ways is kind of like being religious, because to identify as either requires a leap of faith. Everyone likes to claim that they know that there's some hidden meaning of the universe, or there's no meaning at all. Of course, no one can actually say for sure anything about that, given it is not within the realm of our understanding of what is going on. So atheists and religious people love to argue about this type of stuff all the time. The irony is that many of them share much in common, feeling the need to argue about things that they really don't know the answer to. Thus, overall, science is something that can be for everyone, religious or not. History has shown that, religious or not, anyone can make gigantic scientific contributions. Thus, the goal should be to ensure people are not conducting pseudoscience out of the desire to prove what they already believe, like people trying to prove creationism, for example. At the same time, though, those who are not religious shouldn't be hostile to people who are, because instead of telling people you can't do science and be religious, which is certainly incorrect, is a matter of teaching people how to do science properly and following the scientific method of inquiry. But alienating people by discriminating against people who are religious, which is a major problem in the new atheist movement today, is counterproductive to society and more likely to lead people to become religious fundamentalists that reject things like evolution and the Big Bang, by dividing people between these different camps, religious and non-religious. But what unites us is what makes us human, not the debates regarding the meaning of existence or lack thereof. Good science is good science regardless of who's doing it, and therefore science should be for everyone because it always has been historically. So with that, always remember, billions of years led to you, so make the most of it.